If you follow me on Twitter, you knew it was coming. Welcome to a special Notsam Wrestling Emergency Podcast. It's an emergency podcast because we have feelings. And how can you not have feelings after the news comes out that CM Punk is cleared? Yes, we find out on Monday Night Raw that CM Punk is cleared. And by the way, we found out a lot on Monday Night Raw. There was a lot going on, and we'll get into all of it, in the days that come. Of course, from Rhea and Dom. I think we're gonna have another emergency podcast about the Wyatt 6 segment. But today, we just need to talk about our feelings on the fact that not only is it official that CM Punk is once again cleared to compete, but it is official that we're getting it. At SummerSlam, we're getting Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. And not just Drew McIntyre and CM Punk, but with a special guest referee, Seth Rollins. Now, the stipulation itself has drawn a lot of discussion. There are people who legitimately think that Hell in a Cell should be the stipulation for the first match between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. And I suppose I understand the logic in, well, they've gotten so many officials involved, and they've screwed each other over in so many different parts of the building, I suppose. But this idea that we start at Hell in a Cell and work backwards is one of the most illogical things I've ever heard when it comes to wrestling storytelling. For the most part, there's exceptions to every rule, and there are outliers. But this one, I mean, honestly, I kind of am surprised that we're getting any stipulation at all. As hot as this Drew McIntyre CM Punk story has gotten, I assumed that the first Drew McIntyre CM Punk match would be just that. No stipulation, no street fight, no special referee, no cage, no ladder, no table, no chairs. Just Drew and Punk settling this score that people say started after the Royal Rumble, but I think started way before that. However, you do have to acknowledge the fact that this stuff with Seth Rollins has been cooking along the same time as all the Drew and Punk stuff has. So let's go through the segment first. Okay, so Monday Night Raw, CM Punk is advertised, Cult of Personality plays. It's still, hearing Cult of Personality play and seeing CM Punk come out on Monday Night Raw it's a wild, wild thing. If you've been watching wrestling for as long as I've been watching wrestling for, or even, if you've been watching wrestling for over 10 years, this is a nutso thing for you to see, I'm sure. CM Punk comes down and he announces that as of Saturday, his doctor has cleared him to compete, and he is ready to fight Drew McIntyre right now in Green Bay, Wisconsin, at Monday Night Raw. He has come out to announce that he's cleared, and he wants to fight right now. He is so tired of all of the back and forth that has happened between Drew and Punk, and the feelings have gotten so personal that we must settle this immediately. And Drew McIntyre's music played. We had earlier seen him speaking with Adam Pearce, so we knew he was there. We had assumed that he had worked out some kind of deal with Adam Pearce based on the suspension that was kept going as of last week. But Drew McIntyre comes out and he's all, "Oh, I've been waiting for this. I was wanting this. I was praying on this." And he takes his amazing Scottish mane out of that constricting ponytail and lets his hair down, shakes it out, and he goes, "And I'm gonna get in there, except I don't want to." And you go, "What?" And he goes, No. This match is too big for Green Bay, Wisconsin. No, this is a big money match. I don't want to. And CM Punk goes, "Well, I do." And he runs out, but there's tons of security and officials and lots of people that are separating them. And when I say separating them, I mean they have to hold CM Punk back. Drew isn't moving a muscle, which is interesting because at various points in this story, Drew McIntyre has been the one that has had to have been held back. Remember, he threw that elbow at Adam Pearce. He shoved officials. Like, he has been at his very wit's end, if I may say so. But that's the way emotions work in real life, right? Just because you're furious in this moment doesn't mean you carry that fury and lack of control with you at all times. And this story has gone so up and down, back and forth. This one's ahead, that one's ahead. That this level of fury kind of flip-flops between Punk and Drew McIntyre. And Drew McIntyre, as badly as he does want to get his hands on CM Punk and does want to inflict pain on CM Punk. Now the reality is here. The reality is set in. We actually have the option of having this match. And we see how badly CM Punk wants it. And remember, the trolling itself really started with Drew making fun of CM Punk for not being able to compete. So Drew is that master troll. Drew, if he's staying true to the character that he's always been and has been able to center himself a little bit since Clash at the Castle, would try to continue to keep CM Punk from competing for as long as he can, because that's the ultimate revenge, isn't it? So he says big money match. We immediately get the feeling, okay, he's talking about SummerSlam. Adam Pearce comes out and he announces that it's official. Of course, Adam Pearce is having a hell of a time right now. Brawls are going on across this place, whether it's Braun Breaker and Sami Zayn, whether it's Jey Uso getting involved, whether it's the Judgment Day, whether it's Rhea and Liv, whether it's Gunther and Damian Priest. He can keep any of these fights in the ring. Not even close. So he comes out and he says it's official. CM Punk is cleared to compete, and it's official that we're getting Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk at SummerSlam. Everybody cheers, and CM Punk's like, let's do it now, let's do it now. And Drew's going, don't listen to him, Punk, fight through it, fight through it. He just wants to get him in trouble, you know? And then Adam Pearce says, I do admit, though, we do have a problem. We have had a problem, a big problem. And Seth's music hits a little early, and he goes, a referee problem, which is then when Seth's music should have hit, because Seth Rollins comes out looking like $1 million with sleeves that drape down further than my grandmother's curtains. I don't know who chooses where to use what amounts of fabric on these jackets that Seth Rollins wears. I don't know if this is somebody crafting for them. I don't know if this attire exists in actual nature. Like, has there ever been a human being that wears some of this stuff besides Seth Rollins, the Visionary? I don't know. But regardless, he's in that ring with sleeves that are about 6 feet long from arm to ground, and announces that he indeed will be the special referee. And Drew McIntyre is not pleased. Drew McIntyre thought he was firmly in control. He knew the SummerSlam match was happening. He knew he was going to stop Punk from attacking him and drive Punk crazy. He didn't know about this special guest referee thing. And CM Punk doesn't like it either. CM Punk knows how much Seth Rollins hates him. He doesn't understand why this is happening. And now it seems like the control in this segment shifted from party to party to party. It started with CM Punk firmly in control, as he was the one who was announcing that he was medically cleared. Then Drew McIntyre took control by not allowing the fight to happen in that moment and being in control of when the actual fight takes place. Then that power is removed that came from CM Punk to Drew is removed from Drew and given to Seth Rollins, because Seth knew all of this was happening and that he was going to be the referee, which was the piece of the puzzle that neither Drew McIntyre nor CM Punk had any idea of. And Adam Pearce is right. There is an official problem. I think Adam Pearce needs to work on maintaining some law and order on his television program. But it's a very interesting dynamic, because let's look at this story. It all makes sense. These three are completely intertwined. We know, based on the WrestleMania documentary, that CM Punk versus Seth Rollins was set to happen at WrestleMania 40. If we hadn't had the documentary, it would have been a safe assumption that CM Punk versus Seth Rollins was set to happen at WrestleMania based on anybody who watches wrestling. CM Punk returns as a surprise at Survivor Series. On that night, there was a lot of controversy. On that night, there were a lot of people trying to figure out who was quote-unquote working and who was quote-unquote shooting, and who was working shoots and who was shooting works. Everybody was trying to figure it out. And it was really based on two reactions. It was Seth Rollins flipping him off, cursing him out, furious, being held back by Corey Graves, who was coming off of commentary. This was after the show went off the air. And Seth Rollins' disdain for CM Punk had been well documented. At Royal Rumble last year, at the media day, he was asked, what do you think of CM Punk Phil Brooks coming to WWE? And Seth Rollins said he was a jerk. I believe he called him a cancer. I don't remember for sure. Don't quote me on that, but that was the spirit. And he said, Philly Phil, stay far, far away. 10 months later, Philly Phil is right in the same arena as you. And Rollins lets him have it. Now, at the same time, Drew McIntyre, I believe, was on the opposing team at War Games. And before Punk came out, Drew left in a huff. And he was filmed leaving in a huff. They looked furious, and they said he's legit furious. He's not storyline furious. That's what some of these sites said. And people attributed it to CM Punk being there. And what did they do? They went with it. They kept it going. They said Drew McIntyre was unapproachable in the locker room after Survivor Series. And then these stories that would appear on the internet spilled out onto television, where immediately when CM Punk started talking in WWE, Seth Rollins had a problem with him and made his problem with him clear. We did I believe it was, I don't even know if we probably didn't refer to them, we might have, as emergency podcasts when the first Seth Rollins CM Punk confrontation happened, but I know we did a show about it just because it was this like unbelievable moment when the two squared off. But as much as as much as Seth versus Punk was this like, oh my God, rivalry dream match thing that we were starting to inch toward, Drew McIntyre, every chance that he got, even before the Royal Rumble, was talking about how he was not happy that CM Punk was in that locker room, that he was not happy that CM Punk was there, and he did this on TV, and he did this off of TV. And the Drew McIntyre character evolved into this sort of, into a heel, certainly a heel turn, but a very unique type of heel that's only done every so often by a select number of very skilled performers, where they are a villain, but all of their villainy is based on very real truth, and it's just how they handle what's happening to them that makes them a villain, not the fact that they're actually villainous. So then the Royal Rumble happens, and there's even speculation that CM Punk may win the Royal Rumble so he can choose World Heavyweight Champion Seth Rollins to face at WrestleMania. But Cody Rhodes wins the Royal Rumble, and we find out after the Royal Rumble that CM Punk tore his tricep, his first match, only match on WWE television in the last decade. And he tears his tricep in the Royal Rumble match during some physicality with Drew McIntyre. And that's when the Seth Rollins stuff goes away. Seth Rollins first becomes involved in the Cody Rhodes stuff, and then becomes looped into the sort of Cody bloodline final boss story, as well as Drew McIntyre, who wins the Elimination Chamber. But Drew McIntyre, right after the Royal Rumble, says that he prayed for this to happen, and it did. And Drew spends January and February, like the end of January and all of February, trolling CM Punk every chance that he gets. He has 2 different T-shirts trolling CM Punk. He talks about how happy he is that CM Punk is injured. Every time he brings up Seth Rollins, he also brings up CM Punk. You know, he won't keep his mouth shut. CM Punk ends up on commentary for the World Heavyweight title match after Rollins had already wrestled the night before in a tag team match with Cody Rhodes against Roman Reigns and The Rock. He shows up on night 2, opening night 2 of WrestleMania against, I think that was night 2, unless it was night 1. I think it was night 2 of WrestleMania against Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre beats him for the World Heavyweight title, gets up on the table, rubs it in Punk's face. Punk screws him over by tripping him, hitting him with his tricep brace. Damian Priest cashes in. Drew McIntyre's title reign after hugging his wife and tweeting is gone after 5 minutes. Rivalry elevated. Now we're focused on the Punk and Drew stuff. The next night on Raw, Drew has the chance to become the number 1 contender. CM Punk jumps out from under the ring, interferes again. Now, this is key because up until WrestleMania, CM Punk was not on most of the shows. And when he was on, he'd be on, like, he was on the WrestleMania Countdown show. He was like doing broadcasting stuff. But he wasn't showing up and cutting promos every week on television after Royal Rumble, before WrestleMania. After WrestleMania is when you started to feel his presence more, and this Drew thing started building. And eventually, of course, Drew, after getting screwed another time at Clash at the Castle by CM Punk, Drew goes nuts, beats down CM Punk, steals the family bracelet. Then Punk screws him over at, what was the last pay-per-view? There's so many spots along this road where they're screwing each other over. The builds and builds on this. Oh, yeah. The Money in the Bank, of course. When Drew McIntyre wins the Money in the Bank briefcase, tries to cash it in, CM Punk stops him. But in the process of stopping him from cashing it in, not only screws over Drew McIntyre, but Damian Priest is able to get the victory, thus not allowing Seth Rollins to win the title back and making it so that Seth Rollins does not get another shot at that title. So now CM Punk has brought Seth Rollins into the fold, has brought Seth Rollins into this story. And it's interesting when you look at it, because I immediately think of SummerSlam 97. And it was the sort of 97, 98 when we had this many, even 99, when we had this many stories kind of happening simultaneously and overlapping each other, right? Because Seth had a story with Rock and Cody and the Bloodline, but at the same time had this story with Drew McIntyre, while Drew McIntyre had a story with him, but also CM Punk, and Punk and Seth had never tied up their things. So all these different stories are intertwining with each other, and that was happening in the late 90s in WWE. And this whole thing takes me back to SummerSlam 97, where the main event was The Undertaker defending his title against Bret the Hitman Hart, with Shawn Michaels as the guest referee. Now, this match would lead to two things. It would lead to Bad Blood, which was Hell in a Cell, the very first Hell in a Cell match in 1997. And that would also lead to Survivor Series 1997, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, the Montreal Screwjob. It wasn't exactly the same because Shawn Michaels didn't necessarily have beef with both people. He and The Undertaker didn't get along, but there wasn't this other heated rivalry with The Undertaker the way it was with Shawn Michaels. The way it was with Bret Hart. However, the stipulation was, if Shawn Michaels is not fair to both competitors, Bret Hart included in this match, then, Shawn doesn't get a title shot or Shawn gets fired, whatever. There was a stipulation. And Shawn ends up having to make the count. He accidentally hits The Undertaker with a chair. And then he has to make the count on the interference that he caused, leading to Shawn having to face The Undertaker, and then Shawn getting to face Bret to close out 1997. I say all this is interesting, not only because it harkens back to Shawn, Bret, and Undertaker, but very, very interestingly, clearly Seth Rollins is Shawn Michaels in this scenario. But for the first time, in a storyline that echoes Bret Hart, CM Punk is not Bret Hart. If anyone, I guess he's The Undertaker, but he doesn't really fit that role because he does have such animosity. If he's anyone in that trio, he's The Undertaker. Because in this rivalry, Drew McIntyre is 1,000% Bret the Hitman Hart. Remember when I said that Drew McIntyre evolved into this heel that is justified, so not really a heel, but a heel because of the way they handle their business? That's Bret Hart to a T. When Drew McIntyre throws hissy fits because he's getting screwed, that's Bret Hart to a T. That's what Bret Hart was doing on the way to WrestleMania 13 before he turned heel all the way. So, you could say, it's interesting because even you could say, because some have said Drew and Punk are like Brett and Shawn, but not really. Punk and Seth are more like Brett and Shawn, I think, than Drew and Punk. But what's interesting about that is, again, Seth is probably more Bret Hart in that scenario than CM Punk is. Seth is the workhorse. Punk is the one who gets special treatment. Seth is the one that's kind of the company guy. Punk is the one that's the disruptor. So I just find it fascinating that in all the time that Punk was in AEW, he's the biggest Bret Hart fan there is, and I respect him greatly for it. But he would do so much to tribute Bret Hart. And now he's involved in two stories, the story with Drew and the story with Seth. Both of them harken back to Bret the Hitman Hart stories, but in neither one of them is he Bret the Hitman Hart. If you're going to compare it to anything, Seth and Punk, I could make the comparison to Bret and Shawn, with Seth being Bret, Punk being Shawn. Yeah, I mean, Drew and Punk is much more like Bret and Austin, I think. Where Bret doesn't understand as the go-to good guy that you can depend on, how this disruptor comes in from out of nowhere and everybody loves him all of a sudden. How did this even happen to him? That was the story of Bret and Austin. It's also the story of Drew and Punk. So it's another Bret Hart rivalry, but Punk is Austin. Punk's not Bret. Very interesting that the shadow of Bret Hart doesn't go anywhere. But the roles are reversed in both those scenarios. This is a big match. And I would imagine Solo Sikoa versus Cody Rhodes is closing SummerSlam. I stand by Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk could close any pay-per-view it's on, including SummerSlam. And Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk may still close SummerSlam. It wouldn't be, the most... I would get it if that happened. I do think that with Seth Rollins in there as the special guest referee, that it is a sort of big, swirling red light that lets you know that this is the first match, but it's not the only match. And by the way, going back to Austin, the last time I saw somebody effectively move a story along for months while they were injured and couldn't compete in the ring was Stone Cold Steve Austin. And CM Punk is now following in those shoes. I think that this story has been so deep that people aren't even considering. This is Punk's first singles match on television in the WWE since his return. He has not had a televised singles match. He's had one televised match, and that was the Royal Rumble match. He had two live event matches, both against Dominic Mysterio, because Dominic Mysterio is the technician of this or any generation. Best there is, best there was, best there ever will be. But I think it's going to be very interesting after SummerSlam. Because once SummerSlam hits, CM Punk has touched the canvas. CM Punk has donned the tights. CM Punk is not a superstar that's here and this is so cool. CM Punk is a wrestler. So going forward, we can now have those conversations about who CM Punk is going to wrestle. It's all very, very exciting. I'm very, very excited by all of it. Don't forget, speaking of SummerSlam, if you're going to SummerSlam and you're going to be in Cleveland, get there Thursday night. We'll be doing a live Not Sam Wrestling podcast at Hilarities Comedy Club. You can get tickets at notsam.com, having huge conversations about guests. I want to make this a very, very special one. We've already had some very, very special live podcasts this year. If you're not going to be in Cleveland, but you're going to be in New York, I'll be doing two different live Not Sam Wrestling podcasts at Fanatics Fest. So if you're going to Fanatics Fest, if you got tickets for that on Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon, I'll be there doing Notsam Wrestling. I'm very excited about all of it. I think we're probably going to end up talking again real soon. I think we need another emergency podcast. I think we got some Wyatt 6 to talk about. Until then, subscribe, like, rate, review, comment. I'll see you soon.